am so excited to introduce you all to our very first interview on the podcast. This is Shrestha Maharaj. She is an analytics and insights manager at Procter and Gamble. Welcome, Shrestha. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you, Seth. And I must say, you do such a good job of pronouncing my name. Like, so
Oh
many
my
people,
gosh.
but you do a really good job. And I'm super excited to be here. From the time we first chatted about this, I've been so excited. So I'm glad it's finally here.
Thank you so much. I know I loved our very first conversation. I just felt like the energy was great, and we're both obviously really passionate about data analytics. And what I love about your story as well is just that you come from this non-traditional background. You've had so much prior experience in the medical industry, am I right? Like more medical sales?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Medical, a
Yeah.
little bit on the clinical side, and then the pharmaceutical side. But yeah, very varied experience within that medical space.
I love that. There's so many people who make these career switches and they've had backgrounds that don't really fully align with data analytics in particular. And so I just really love highlighting success stories of folks who've come from a background that isn't even related to it and they found their way in the field. And clearly you're doing it very successfully. So let's just go ahead and kick off this interview. I'd love to hear more about how you got into your current role at Procter and Gamble, what most people don't realize about what you actually do day to day, and kind of just what that looks like.
Yeah, definitely. So I must say it's really been a journey. Like when I first started at P&G, I started as a pharmaceutical sales rep. So completely different field. But my intent to move into a data analytics role and do this whole career change was from actually before. So I had already started doing some courses and stuff. But when I was within the pharmaceutical rep space in P&G, I was lucky to have a really supportive manager at the time who I actually was able to be very open with and say, this is actually where I want my career to progress to. This is what I want to do. I'm pretty passionate about it. By that time, I had done a few courses, so I had a good idea of what it entailed. And yeah, it's just been a journey of communicating with people, more senior leaders within the company, expressing interest. And P&G is a company where they really put your career and development first. And once you express that interest, they will do everything to make that happen. So I was very lucky in that aspect, but I had to also put in the work. So I did a lot of courses and I've reached out. I managed to do a mentorship with the senior analytics and insights manager at the time. And I think I mentored under him for 3 months before a role became available where I interviewed, and it was a very technical heavy role. So at the time, he really liked that I had the technical experience from the courses that I had done. So when I interviewed, then I was chosen for the position and I was able to then transition, and he then became my manager. So it really did become full circle, but it was an amazing opportunity. And from then, my role has just progressed. I started off as a business analyst, and now I'm in the analytics and insights space as the analytics and insights manager. So definitely a progression. And I mean, it's overwhelming to think of how it's progressed in such a short space of time.
I absolutely love that. When you were talking about being in pharmaceutical sales, was that like a role that you had already within P&G and then you just kind of pivoted into a data analytics role? Or were you in pharmaceutical sales prior to entering the company? Kind of what did that look like?
Yeah. Prior to the company, I was in still medical sales rep, but I was more in the surgical space. So I worked a lot more in theaters. So pharmaceutical repping was actually really new to me at P&G as well. That's where I actually started in the pharmaceutical space entirely. So very different. It was a bit of a change, but I mean, the change wasn't as drastic as changing from sales to data analytics. So I mean, that is where my journey at P&G really began. And it was very new to me even then in the pharmaceutical space.
Got it. I love that. I think it's just so interesting when people make these shifts. I would love to hear more about kind of that moment where it clicked for you. I want to pursue data analytics, right? Because that is a shift from what you were doing before.
Yeah. The reality is I always knew I wanted to work with numbers. And, in science, you get to do that. You do a lot of research, you are collecting data, you analyzing the data, utilizing stats, but it's just a completely different field. And often it's not associated together. So when I was in medical sales rep, I knew at the time it didn't sit well with me. I knew that I probably wasn't going to be able to get into medical research without doing a PhD, a postdoc, and at the time it wasn't something I wanted to pursue further. And I felt like the nearest next thing. And I had a colleague at the time when I was doing medical repping in the surgical space, and she actually told me about it, and she's like, maybe we like need to explore data science, because we were both in the same kind of mid-career crisis, if you could call it. We just felt like it wasn't fulfilling anymore, and we were exploring other fields, and we had both studied the same thing, had the same background, very similar. And she told me about data science, and I researched it. I kind of became a bit obsessed with the idea, did like a ton of courses, and I think the more I learned about it, the more I loved it. Because I was like one of those people that loved maths in school. Like while people hated it, I was like, oh, I don't have to study maths tomorrow. So I guess like just being in a field where I get to leverage that is just, for me, it's amazing.
That's incredible. I do think those conversations, even in your current role, right? Even if it's not related to data analytics, like just having a general need within your department and having those conversations with the people you work with can oftentimes spark new ideas for how you might want to grow into your role. It's really amazing. I know when we spoke last time, you had also mentioned taking courses and getting mentors, chatting with more people about PNG. Can you walk me through a little bit more about how you kind of self-advocated for yourself and navigated this transition into your role now?
Yeah. Definitely. Like, I had to express that interest, because if I never self advocated with leaders within the company, I probably never would be where I am today. So, a lot of it is kind of networking internally. We always think about networking externally in the industry with other data analysts, but sometimes there's opportunities where you're at already. Like, you don't always need to look outside, look within. Most of the time, companies, if you're a really good employee or talent, they want to keep you. So, networking, finding out where that gap is, what do I need to do to get from A to B? And that's what I really did. So just for a little bit of context, I moved from the healthcare side of the business, so the pharmaceutical side, to the FMCG side, which was at the time very separate businesses. And the moving between the two was kind of unheard of. I was like the second person to actually move from the healthcare side to that side. And because I was a medical sales rep, I actually stayed outside of where the head office is. And I never really got to network with the people. So I would have like company events once in a year where I would see the full organization. And I definitely leveraged that. I remember seeing our country manager at the time. And I'm like, it's do or die. I need to go speak to her and explain to her, this is my interest and what do I need to get there. And, I literally, there was a bus waiting, and I was like, I told my manager, I was like, I need 5 minutes. And I ran and I spoke to her. And I promise you that changed my life, because she made it happen after that. Like that one conversation from that work event, she remembered it, and she made sure when she got back to office, she got the ball rolling. That's how the mentorships kicked off. So I think you just have to kind of just take the shot, take the plunge. It's intimidating. It's scary. I mean, she didn't know me from a bar of soap, because I never actually worked directly with her. But I mean, she took a chance on me, and that I'm always grateful for.
You bring up such a good point about networking, just how important it is internally, because I've found even for myself, when I start a new role at a company, I will try to have, well, when I start, you're obviously having a lot of meetings, right? Because you're trying to meet all of your new coworkers and your manager. But even after that period, like for a long time, I would just try to have a couple of one-on-ones with someone outside of my department every single month. Because you're right, there's just something unexpected that may come up, like a new opening where you can kind of pivot, transition if you want to try out a new career. So that's incredible that you were able to manage that maneuver at this company, especially being someone that is only like one of two people that's been able to accomplish it. That's great. I love that. So, all right, kind of transitioning a little bit, I want to talk about applying for analytics jobs, because I know that this is a concern for a lot of aspiring data analysts. They're trying to get into the field. And now is a really hard time in particular. The job market's tough. AI is taking over. It's becoming a lot more difficult, I think, for people to get those interviews going quickly. So, what would your advice be? I know that you kind of had a leg up in this area because you were already at the company, you already were building that credibility. But is there any advice that you think you would give to people who are trying to apply to analytics roles? Maybe they're not really hearing anything back. Maybe they're starting to doubt themselves. What advice do you think you would give for those people?
Yeah, I think I fully understand like what they're going through because I mean, even though I kind of had that leg up, I think prior to that, I went through the process, and I got those rejection letters. And I would be wondering, like, I've done so many courses, where's the gap? And the reality is, it's just translating those skills to real life. So my advice would be to actually reach out to smaller businesses, and collaborate with them. They probably don't have the resources to get a data analyst to do the analytics for them. Leverage that, like do a collaboration, build case studies of how you've changed the business, of grown the business for these different small businesses. Really leverage those opportunities. Think out of the box. That's what's going to help you stand out. There's so many people doing courses. I mean, before I got to PNG, I was doing free courses, and there's a ton of them. Anyone can do it. But set yourself aside, build a portfolio, yes, but also network outside with other analysts. See how did they pivot? Who did they get mentored under if they were? There's also mentorships in the industry where you can get mentors or sponsors that will actually guide you, help you meet other people, leverage tools, resources like that. I mean, there's so much we don't actually think of apart from just applying for that job. So there's a lot of opportunities and ways to build yourself within that space without even getting a job offer yet.
I love that you were talking about out of the box because I'm the same way. I like to think of, I don't know if even calling it scapegoating is the word, but just trying to find like a moment of opportunity within the job search that maybe other people aren't pursuing. And
Yeah,
the way that
definitely.
helped me kind of break into the field was working for a company that is not as well known. So many people strive for these top name brand companies, and reasonably
Yeah,
so. I mean, there's so much credibility behind it, but it doesn't mean you have to start there. Like, you may be able to
100.
start at a smaller company, like you said, that's just maybe not as well known and they need more analytics support. So you start to get that experience. I love that idea. It's fantastic. And another question I had for you was more around the work that you're doing now. So you are an analytics and insights manager. I know when we spoke last, we were having a lot of fun talking about like the level of communication that's involved with your role. Like, share with the audience more about that.
Sure. So, yeah, I work in analytics and insights, but it's very sales analytics. And I think like the day to day is a lot of like finding those opportunities, working with the sales data, and sometimes leveraging unconventional data sources. But yeah, I think like what we were talking about was my role started so technical heavy as a business analyst, a lot of dashboard building, automation, and then it kind of evolved into more like strategic, where are the opportunities, and then selling that both internally and externally to stakeholders. And then that for me was like a little bit of a shock to my system because it was like like at the moment it's like presentation after presentation. Like I never realized I would be spending this much time building presentations, but here we are. I definitely think it's not a bad thing. I think the true value in the data comes out from how we actually communicate it. And I'm not saying that the technical skills is not a critical aspect. It definitely is, and it's so important. But the soft skill is really how we influence, how we sell our ideas, how we actually get action out of our insights. So without it, like the data becomes a little bit useless, if I say, but yeah, very loosely say. We need those skills, and I think it's such an underrated skill because when I did so many courses, nothing touched on that soft skill side. Everything was so technical heavy that when I got there, I was like, okay, what do I do now? But yeah, definitely
Yes.
a learning. for me.
That's really tough for a lot of people. And I see it on so many different levels. Even for me as an entry level data analyst several years ago, I would have so many presentations to give, and no one taught me how to do this correctly. And so a lot of times the insights just fell flat. It's like, well, here's the number, and then that's it. So we were talking about stakeholder communication and having to make these insights land. And there's a lot of pressure behind that. I think it takes a lot of confidence to really stand up in front of stakeholders and own the analysis that you did and tie it to the business context and then translate it appropriately to actually drive action. Just love to hear more about what's helped you become more confident in this area.
Yeah, I think there's a few aspects. I think one is knowing the data really well. Because when you stand in front of a stakeholder, the reality is you probably know that data better than they do. And just one, knowing the data, but also having confidence that you know the data best. And that's advice I've even gotten from my managers. It's like, no one knows the data better than you. And then the other element is that know more than just the data. And what I mean is, like, I'm in like the consumer goods section. So like consumer shopping behaviors and stuff is really important. So what is actually happening outside? Research, understand a little bit more depth in what you're presenting. So you're not just saying what's on the slide. And like telling them this is why. You actually showing them like it's also happening outside. Like, I've done the research, we're seeing it here, and it's actually an evolving trend. I think that also helps build the confidence because you have something else apart from your analysis to back it up or further back it up. And then the last part is just kind of knowing the business. What are their priorities? What's important to them? Is your analysis speaking to that? If not, that's okay too. Maybe they're looking in the wrong direction, but then you need to have a very solid foundation on what you're basing this off of. But I think once you know the business priorities, the strategy, and you understand the business better, you kind of get that confidence and you're able to communicate with them on that level.
100%. I always tell people if you're having trouble feeling confident when you're speaking, if you just know your stuff inside and out, like that's step number one. It's if you're spending all this time in the data and you're just letting yourself kind of get in a more practical rabbit hole, if there is such a thing, letting yourself get more of that tunnel vision with what you're doing and just soaking in all of the context and the information that the data is giving you. 100% agree. It definitely gives you a lot more context. And I also love what you shared about kind of seeking out outside resources, like getting in touch with industry reports, even just internally with the business, being familiar with like what the business goals are, what other departments are working on, how that connects with what your team's doing. Like having all that business context just makes it so much more clear for you to be able to have those conversations. I know that we had talked about, building these technical skills and how that's obviously a requirement. I know for a lot of other people out there, they're coming from a non-technical background. Maybe they don't really have as strong of an analytical mindset yet, but they're still kind of building that muscle. They're building that skill. Maybe they have a little bit more of a relational kind of strength when it comes to like connection and communicating. I would just love to hear your advice, Shrestha, on like, for those people in that position where maybe they just don't quite have the tech part figured out yet, but they still want to break into the industry. They still want to kind of lean into maybe some of they call them soft skills. I call them core skills of like communication and business context. What advice would you give for those people?
Say that they actually have the hardest part down, which is the soft skills, because technical skills, you can get it with practice. And as I said, there's a ton of courses, but the actual gap is in the soft skills. If you have that down, I mean, there's so many resources where you can actually learn the technical skills, hone on it. And honestly, you don't always need the fanciest of tools. I've seen data analysts that just use Excel and advanced Excel, and they do a pretty good job. I mean, yes, having the Python and machine learning is great, but I mean, you can also do so much with just Excel. So I think don't underestimate what you can do with basic skills, and you can get a lot out of the data. It just takes practice, But again, like in my opinion, they have the hardest part down. So, I mean, that should not dishearten them at all.
I love that you mentioned Excel. I'm a big Excel fan. And as a data analyst, I've used Excel in every single role, every company that I've had. I feel like it's the baseline of all businesses. Everyone knows
Yes.
Excel.
Yeah, but on different levels. And that's what's amazing. I mean, Excel is the base, 100%, but some people don't even understand how powerful it is, which is shocking. Like when you actually learn, like, wow, I can do this on Excel. Yeah.
Yes, it's true. I took an advanced Excel class in my MBA program, and it just blew my mind, the possibilities, so much that you can
Wow.
create there. Yeah, but I love what you were saying about how you can learn the tech skills over time. I think a lot of people have in their minds that, like, I can't apply for a job until I have these 4 or 5 different tech tools mastered. And it's just such a barrier. Prolongs your ability to enter the field. It prohibits you from feeling more confident entering the field. And so I just love what you said about, like, leverage what you have, the skills that you do have. Yes, that doesn't mean like skip tech altogether. Obviously, you do need to spend some time learning these tech skills, but don't let that stop you from like starting in there. Well, Shrestha, the podcast is called The Quietly Ambitious Analyst. I know we really connected over this when we met last time. What does quiet ambition mean to you personally?
Yeah. I really love the name of this podcast. And I know I told you this before, but it's something that resonates with me so much. So I think like people always associate ambition with being loud and out there, and like you need to show it to actually have it. And I don't always think that's the case. I think for me, quietly ambitious means like, not always the loudest person in the room, but the person that's thinking deeply, analyzing, always asking the why behind what you're seeing, that having that curiosity and continuing to like learn more. That's what that means to me. That's what I take out of it. And I really feel like I resonate with it. I think sometimes there's always this pressure to be the loudest person in the room, to prove that you're the best at what you do. And I don't always think that it has to be that way.
I do think there's this pressure for a lot of people to be really loud and boisterous and have all the answers and know everything. And it just doesn't have to be like that. In fact, a lot of people, as we can see from what you shared, like they respect someone who is thoughtful and considerate and maybe more thorough, more detailed, someone who's just really trying to think through the business problem. Because sometimes the people who are the loudest actually don't maybe have as much value in what it is that they're sharing, right? Because maybe they're
100%.
just more concerned about looking good.
And I've seen that so many times. So that's exactly it.
Yeah, so that's what this podcast is all about. So I've really enjoyed this conversation. Shrestha, your experience is incredible to me. I have one last question for you that I think our listeners will really appreciate. I know we've talked a few times about people who come from non-traditional paths. Just kind of as a last parting piece of advice, what would you give to people who maybe don't feel like they really fit the mold in this field just yet?
I think that there's a lot of things that are evolving and changing. And I think the idea of that mold is kind of evolving too. I think that should never restrict you. Like, you know yourself best. And if you feel like this is the right fit for you, then it doesn't actually matter. Like, I think that the best insights actually come from people that come from this unconventional background, maybe don't necessarily fit that mold. You wouldn't actually think that, hey, this person would be a data analyst, because they have these layered experiences, they have different views, they see things differently versus the conventional person. And I think we need more of that out of the box thinking. And I know I'm saying out of the box again, but I think like that's where the value comes. We're all looking in one direction, but who's actually seeing the stuff happening on the side? That's what you need. So I don't think we should get fixated on the idea of a mold. Like, you truly know yourself, and you know deep down, if you think you believe you're capable, then nothing should stop you.
It's all about believing in yourself first and foremost. It's so important to really craft your own story of yourself and to feel more confident that you can do this, you can step in the role. It's just about having the mindset. And I love what you mentioned about coming from these different fields, it does add a lot of value because you've had these different perspectives now from other areas of the business. Even if it's not directly in analytics, I mean, data analytics is ultimately about people. So if you've worked anywhere, you've worked with people. So there's some connection at some level. Yes. I love that. Thank you so much. That was fantastic advice. As we're wrapping up this podcast interview, I would love for our listeners to get the chance to follow you. So Shrestha, where could they find you?
Okay, I think firstly they can find me on LinkedIn, Shrestha Maharaj. And then I do have a TikTok page. It's not always data analytics, but I do sometimes share a day in the life of a data analyst. And sometimes I give some advice now and then. My TikTok is called Where's My Chai? I love tea that. And chai means tea. So it's Where's My Chai? So
I love chai. This is fantastic. Great. I need to check out this TikTok. It sounds so perfect for me. Well, I will be sure to put the links in the description of this podcast episode. So anyone who is listening, you can check out the description so that you can go and follow Shrestha right now. Go follow her. Thank you so much, Shrestha. I really appreciate your time just interviewing with me and sharing more of your experience. It's really incredible, and I know it's going to benefit a lot of people.
Thank you so much, Seth, for having me. Like, I really enjoyed this. I love to be able to help other people with whatever knowledge I have, but also I learned so much from just like our conversations together. So I really appreciate that, and I really do value it. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to The Quietly Ambitious Analyst. If today's episode helped you see data in a new way, share it with someone who'd appreciate it too. And follow the show for more lessons on business, communication, and driving impact with data. And if you found it helpful, leaving a quick review really helps this podcast reach more people who want to grow in the same way. Until next time, focus only on what you can control and strive to be 1% better each day.